Hey everyone, welcome to Byte of the Week. It's your digest on Saturdays of what happened in the world of high technology in the last 7 days. So what happened since the last video? What happened? Well, actually kind of a lot of really interesting stuff and a lot of stuff on a similar topic as the things that we talked about last week. Flying cars, believe it or not, drones making a big comeback, some interesting new devices for interfacing with your technology, and shipping, believe it or not. Believe it or not, trucking is making moves. So let's just jump right in. A company called Dedrone raised $15 million this past week. Now, Dedrone is based on an interesting premise. So the idea of it is like, okay, there's drones everywhere and doing all sorts of cool stuff, hanging out at the Super Bowl, being a great light show, and just doing like all sorts of really cool stuff is in the works. However, because technology itself is amoral and it's up to people to do good and hopefully not bad things with it, but that potential for bad still exists. The premise of Dedrone is to make airspaces inaccessible to drones, to have this like virtual wall. And so you might have something like that over important buildings like the Pentagon. You might have this kind of protection over places like airports and other no-fly zones. So it's important for security, and Dedrone is out there as like one of the leaders in making safe spaces to protect them from UAVs in general. Another interesting thing that happened this week, so there's a company called PalV, and they, believe it or not, have started their pre-sale for flying cars. I think it was in last week's video, and I was talking about Uber Elevate, where I said we're probably not going to get flying cars anytime soon. Well, I sit corrected. Flying cars are on their way. If you happen to have $400,000 on hand, please buy that and and have so much fun. When PalV's cars come out, airplanes, whatever you want to call it, when those come out, I will undoubtedly spend a lot of time watching videos of people flying around in them. It's very exciting. I hope that it takes off, pun intended, and they just generally do well, and hopefully not too many people die from mid-air collisions. We'll see how that goes. That should be actually a very interesting situation to navigate, both like from a legal standpoint and navigate literally because you're in the air. In a similar vein to the flying cars, Dubai is actually, and I saw the story and I was like, okay, do people just like take a headline about drones and take a headline about flying cars and just take all these buzzy words and just like put it in together into one headline? But no, this is a real thing. So Dubai this summer is, wait for it, launching their own drone taxi service. For real. This is happening. This is a real thing. So the details are it's this quadcopter drone. It has a pod that's the size of one person, and it can hold a person up to 220 pounds. To start out with, it'll only fly on certain routes, and it's all centrally controlled. So it is autonomous, but it's centrally controlled by some operators that are managing the whole fleet to make sure that there are no clashes. And so it will not be the sort of dystopian future that you see in like Attack of the Clones, I think was one where there were like tons of flying cars, and other like sci-fi movies. I'm just like blown away by that. I honestly did not think that we'd be seeing autonomous taxis anytime soon at all, if we saw them ever. And not only is it a real future, but it's coming this summer to Dubai. So if you happen to be in Dubai this summer, ride one of those, send a video. I'll be looking out for that as well. It's so kind of changing topics. So moving on to something a little more philosophical. Microsoft recently came out with a call to companies that they should set up a digital Geneva convention. Now, and here's the interesting thing. So like technology is evolving at this like light speed pace, and there hasn't been, except for like regulatory pushback, there hasn't been much of like anything holding it back, I guess you could say. And there is a huge potential for abuse, either by governments or by private operators, by companies, by hackers, crackers, actually. And so there's these like really interesting, I guess you could say, gray areas where it's sort of like what is acceptable use of a given technology. And in particular, things like when the FBI asks Apple to unlock an iPhone for them so that they can get into, someone's phone. And it's not even just that. They actually like asked for a backdoor into iPhones, which is extraordinarily shady. That's extraordinarily shady. And obviously Apple did not comply, which was the right thing to do. But there hasn't been, like, beyond that, there hasn't been too much of a uniform response to state actors acting in very not the best interest of their people. There hasn't been a unified response to that. It's mostly just been like, okay, Apple just says, nope, we're not going to comply with that. It's too shady. It's breaking our own encryption, which defeats the purpose of encryption, and it obviously gives a huge amount of power to the government to just spy on people's stuff. What will this Geneva Convention digital equivalent be? And it's basically, the idea of it is to be acceptable use. How do we respond in these kinds of situations? And I think that that's a very smart thing for Microsoft to be doing as a leader in the industry, to gather everyone together and to say, this is how we think about things. This is how we'll respond to outside actors trying to impose things on us. So that is just sort of like in the works as a thought experiment right now, but I hope that it actually materializes. I think that that'll be very, very helpful. On a lighter topic, there's a company called Planet that launched 88 satellites this week. 88. And that's a lot. That's a lot of satellites. The reason that they decided to do that is they are in the industry of capturing images of the Earth, and their goal is to capture medium or high resolution images of the entire Earth every single day. Every single day. And that's crazy. That's like unprecedented. And they said that to be able to do that, it would require something like 100 or 150 satellites working in tandem with each other in a constellation, if you will, to be able to take that many images that often. So they finally did it. They finally got I think they have like 144 out there at this point. So it's like they've got it. They've got as many as they need, and they'll be spinning them, or they'll be turning on that image capturing functionality over the course of the next few months. I don't know what they'll be doing with those images, probably licensing it to things like Google Earth and other companies that would like high image or high resolution images of their properties or just of the world in general. One of the neat startups that I encountered, they just came out of the Accelerator 500 startups, actually. It's called O6, and it's basically an interesting new way of interfacing with iPhones. And in particular, so it's very similar to the Microsoft Surface Dial, where you just like stick that on the screen and then you can like turn it. So if you think about how people have been interfacing with their computing devices over time, it's changed a lot, right? It used to just be keyboard. It used to be, and then like the mouse came around. Eventually, Force Touch and touchscreens came on. Now Force Touch is like an iteration of that. Voice activation is becoming huge now. The O6 is just this little dial, and you should watch the video on the website because it'll show you like all the kinds of different things that it can do. But it allows you to navigate apps basically without having to look at the screen, without having to, engage with like this and that button. It's just this one dial. It has a button and it turns. You can clip it on your clothes. You can put it on your steering wheel. It's a really great idea for those situations where you might want to be interacting with your phone, but it's not safe / legal to, like if you're driving, if you're biking, and so on. I doubt that it will be like this runaway huge success. Maybe I'm wrong, and I hope that I'm wrong. I doubt that it'll be a huge success, but I think that there's a very specific and compelling use case for it for the people who like to use their phones in the car, which is a lot of people, and for people who maybe want to interact with their phone without looking like someone who's going like that, right? And last but not least, a company called Peloton Technology has figured out a way to pair shipping trucks together to allow for greater efficiency in their long distance travels. Now, so what does greater efficiency mean? So if you're familiar with the concept of tailgating, you know that like driving very close to a vehicle that you're in front of gives you a really huge fuel savings, because the car in front of you is basically taking all the wind resistance upon itself, and so you don't have to fight that as you're going behind it. Now, if you know about tailgating, you also know that it's super illegal and it's super dangerous, because if the car in front makes a sudden stop, then you have a negligible amount of time to respond and also stop yourself. And so it's very easy to be part of rear-ending someone if you are tailgating. So that's terrible. However, the fuel savings is like so compelling that oftentimes people do it anyways, and that's kind of too bad. However, if you give two trucks the ability to communicate with each other, and if part of that communication is like, oh, I'm about to stop, oh, I'm stopping, stop now, then the computer in the rear vehicle can respond really fast, and they said 1/10 of a second, to also brake. And so that allows you to basically tailgate safely. And so the net fuel savings is something like 7%, which semi trucks just consume an insane amount of fuel. So a 7% saving is going to be fantastic for the company. It's going to be fantastic for the environment. That came across my screen. The story about these guys came across the screen, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. And it's a really interesting use case that no one really thinks about, because we just sort of like hear tailgating and we're like, oh, that's bad, right? But it's actually a really interesting opportunity that is like empowered by using trucks that have computers in them that can communicate with each other. That's all for this week. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next week.